Hello, everybody. I'm George from Ireland. Well, thank you for coming back to my channel. And so here I am, remembering 50 years since the murder of the Miami Showband. Remember first finding out about this when I was a schoolboy, reading about the Ulster conflict in depth. So back in the 60s and 70s, that was a popular form of entertainment. These traveling bands playing at dances all around Ireland, going around in their bus. And remember, the 60s, RTE only just began. So television was still too expensive for quite a lot of people. It's still black and white. We had two choices with telly, on or off. On the East Coast, you could get the United Kingdom channels. And so it was before disco came in, and they call themselves Miami because of all the associations with glamour, the United States being almost the promised land. There was mass emigration at the time. It's before the 1980s when Miami had connotations, well, Miami Vice, cocaine and drug wars and things like that. I don't know if these guys ever even went to the United States. But anyway, they bravely continued going to Northern Ireland after the Troubles erupted. And there was a very high level of violence. It's hard to realize just how high it was now. Like 1972, 500 people killed in the conflict. I mean, by say 1997, the last full year of conflict was about 10 people a year. Anyway, so these guys never did anything wrong, and on one evening, the 31st of July, they were stopped by what looked like an army patrol, and being stopped and searched by the army, the Royal Ulster Constabulary, that was the police. That was almost a daily occurrence in Northern Ireland at the time, particularly if you're driving around at night. Another thing is the 70s is like cars were not as affordable as they are today. You assume everybody in the countryside has cars, and the 70s it wasn't the case. Remember, Northern Ireland was the poorest part of the United Kingdom. Okay, richer than the Republic of Ireland back then. I mean, the wealth gap between Ireland and Great Britain was like visible even at the 80s. Anyway, they were stopped at what they thought was an army checkpoint, which was, nothing to be surprised about. They've been through that myriad times before, but actually they were terrorists of the Ulster Volunteer Force. So the UVF guys, they got themselves army uniforms. So they stopped them outside Newry. Anyway, so the UVF's dastardly plot was they had made a bomb. They're going to put it in the Miami Showband's van as they searched them, send them on their way. So their vehicle would explode as they drove the Republic of Ireland and kill the guys, but also say, "Oh, you see, they're bad. They're in cahoots with the IRA." There's no reason to believe that they were assisting the IRA whatsoever. Now, some of the guys, well, were aware that something was up. Anyway, the bomb went off prematurely and it killed Harris Boyle and Wesley Somerville, two of the loyalist terrorists. So that is the only good news to come out of this. So hoisted on their own petard. You see that's the funny bit, that there was a bit of justice in that these two guys got killed. Unfortunately, the surviving terrorists, they then shot four of the Miami show band, three of whom died. One survived. The other guy, Lee, fell down, pretended to be dead, and was left for dead. So two of the terrorists were actually in the Ulster Defence Regiment. The UDR was sort of for part-time soldiers. So it was founded in 1969, just after or 1970, just after the disbandment of the B Specials. And some form of B Specials joined it. The UDR was, they're all part-timers. Do your ordinary job as a farmer, a taxi driver, a plumber, or whatever, and then a few hours a week put on your army uniform, be doing your army duties, really in support of the RUC. That was the police, because the police didn't have enough weaponry, and the UDR patrolling through the countryside. So they're local men and local women. The women were called greenfinches. They always tried to have at least one woman on a patrol in case they had to do physical searches of female suspects. But anyway, some of the UDR sympathized with loyalist terrorists, even moonlighted as loyalist terrorists. A secret British Army report, I think it was the 1980s, estimated that at least 5% of them were colluding with loyalist terrorist organizations such as the Ulster Freedom Fighters or the UVF. So unfortunately, guys in the Miami show band, nice guys, were murdered. People who'd never done anything wrong in their lives, had just gone around entertaining people, and it was just really feel good, cheery music, often covers of sort of well-known songs with obviously an American theme. So the poor guys were murdered, and the show band it went going with it carried on with different performers, kind of wound up in 1982. Occasionally they've had what's the word, reunions. Memorial was unveiled in Dublin in about 2007. So that's them. But very sadly, there was some loyalist march recently, and unfortunately, it was adulating Harris Boyle, who was the lowest of the low, an absolutely vile specimen, a terrorist, and such people should not be adulated, should be execrated. So what he did was, you don't need to say immoral, illegal, and he's a sectarian bigot. We don't need that. So he was murdering these guys because, well, most of them were Catholics. Actually, one of them was a Protestant, partly because they came from the Republic of Ireland and wanted nothing to do with the Republic, and partly to pin the blame on them. We're going to blame them for their own deaths by trying to say that they were carrying a bomb, which actually was not true at all. An evil act, and obviously caused fury, resentment in the Catholic community, who were sort of more alienated from the Crown forces because of this thing. I mean, fortunately, some of the UVF murderers were caught and convicted. So anyway, it's very sad to remember more innocent victims of the troubles. Wherever you stand, surely you should recognize the Miami Showband. They never did anything wrong. They were courageous. They took risks just trying to earn a living, but also bolstering people's morale. There was a lot to be furious about or dispirited about in the Troubles, wherever you stand politically. But here they were adding to the gaiety of life, cheering people up. And they could have said, no, 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 too dangerous. We're not going to go there. And had they done so, they may well still be alive today. They were quite young men when they were killed, these three guys. So that is mournful remembrance of the Miami Showband. Anyway, may this kind of thing never happen again. I'm very pleased to say the situation is much, much better now. I mean, obviously, I remember the Troubles, but I only went to Northern Ireland, I think, twice when the Troubles was on, because I'm from Cork, and goodness, we're much, much better off without it. I know that there's some like teenagers, people in their early 20s, who weren't even born at the time the Good Friday Agreement was signed, and they rashly imagine that they somehow missed out, that was something somewhat fun and so on. I can't blame them too much, such as the folly of youth. I remember my unwisdom at a similar age. I had similar feelings, which is obviously idiotic and distasteful of me. Obviously not fun at all, just frightening and depressing and completely unglamorous. Like killing people is not scoring points or whatever. So yeah, it's revolting. Obviously the Good Friday Agreement, there are bits of it I like, bits of I dislike. You have to accept and reject the whole package. Overall, it's much more good than bad, and everybody's far better off. We're all far happier. Peace is worth it. So I suggest we stick with that. They definitely do not want any recrudescence of the conflict. Anyway, so please subscribe on Patreon, donate PayPal, georgecallahan7@gmail.com. Goodbye.